Well, the contract kind of had two parts. So the first part was a deal for $600,000 worth of grenades and ammunition.
Right.
Then the second part was 49 million in ammunition, which is 100 million rounds of AK ammo.
Right.
And 1 million grenades for rocket launchers.
Right.
That is just an insane amount of ammo.
Yeah. So the way it works is when they give you a $300 million contract, they don't give you an order for the whole thing all at once. They divide it into sections called task orders. And they're only required to give you the first task order, which is why we were actually pretty nervous when our first task order was only $600,000, because we had bid the entire contract based on the assumption that we were going to get the full $300 million. And because Afghanistan is a landlocked country, we had to ship it all in by air freight. And air freight is like 80% of the cost is fuel. So it's very expensive and it fluctuates a lot. And because we were asking for a price for hundreds of aircraft loads rather than just one, we got a very big discount on the air freight. So we were able to bid it really competitively. But if they only gave us that first task order for $600K, that wasn't even enough to fill up like one aircraft. So we would have like lost money on that. And so we weren't sure when they first gave us that first order for that first task order. We're like, well, are they going to give us the rest of it? And we're like, maybe they're just testing us. And so we were like really panicking and we're like, oh crap, we're gonna like lose so much money on this. And then they, like a week later, they gave us the second task order, which was $49 million. And then we're like, okay, they're serious about it. They were just waiting for the money to come in. And then later on, they gave us another task order. So they do it in chunks.
If this deal went through the way you wanted it to, how much would you have made off that $300 million yourself?
We were averaging about a 20% profit margin. Wow. We had bid it on a 9%, but then we renegotiated with our suppliers and we ended up doing about an average of 20% profit margin. And so we would have, as a company, we would have made about $60 million in profit. And my deal at the time, before Ephraim tried to renegotiate for this particular contract, was that I would get 25% of the profits. We changed it from the 50% that we were doing for other contracts because this was kind of his bread and butter. This was his specialty, and he just needed my help he had like 5 really solid sources and he wanted me to go find the rest. And so our deal was that I would get 25% of this contract. So I was set personally to make about $15 million.
15 million?
15 million, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, part of the problem is that they wanted Russian ammunition, but you couldn't actually do business with Russia directly.
Correct.
Because they were,
they were on a blacklist.
They're on a blacklist, exactly. Yeah. So you had to try to get Russian ammunition from non-Russian countries.
Correct, yeah.
So how crazy was that?
Yeah, the Russians could have supplied everything. And originally, the army was planning on buying it directly from Russia. But then the Russians ended up selling some nuclear technology to the Iranians. And they got put on a blacklist for that, which meant it was illegal for the U.S. Army to buy it directly from Russia. And so that's why they put it out for open bid. And they knew that there was, other than Russia, there wasn't a single source that could supply the entire contract. And they didn't want to deal with like 50 different countries and all the characters that implied. So that's why they put it out for open bid, to find a middleman like us to go and put the whole bid together.
Well, in terms of this contract, the biggest part of it was AK-47 ammunition.
Yeah. Well, I would say that was the biggest logistical aspect of it. It was actually just about 10% of the value of the contracts, about like $30 million worth was for the AK-47 ammo, but it was by far the biggest shipping hurdle. So AK-47 ammo is it's low value. So just to give you a comparison, we were shipping it in aircraft loads of about 45 tons. And for 45 tons, we could fit about $300,000 worth of ammunition for the AK-47. For the same amount of tons, we could fit about $3 million worth of grenades. So it was about 10 times cheaper, 10 times less money for the weight for the AK-47 ammo. And so this was going to be by far our biggest logistical hassle and the most aircrafts and the biggest headache in the contract, but it was actually just 10% of the value of the contract.
Okay, well, when it comes to the AK ammunition, you guys had quotes from different countries, from Hungary, Czech Republic.
Yeah.
But Tomei had a strong connection with Albania.
Correct.
And the government in Albania was a bit crazy.
Yeah.
Because they were paranoid over getting attacked. So there was huge piles of ammunition all over the country.
Yeah.
So you guys decided to go with Albania.
Right. Yeah. As you said, the reason that Albania was actually one of the most armed places per capita on Earth at the time, because during the Cold War they were run by this very paranoid dictator who thought he pulled out of his alliance with the Soviet Union and made an alliance with China because he felt like the Soviets weren't true communists, and the Chinese were thrilled to have an ally in Europe. So they supplied him with an enormous amount of munitions, and he built a network of bunkers all over the country and filled them all up with with ammunition and weapons so that they'd be safe from bombardment, because he thought that the Soviets would invade him, and he also thought that the West would invade him. So the world's two superpowers he thought would invade his tiny little country, and his plan was to have what he called total war, where every man, woman, and child becomes a soldier and everyone fights to the death. That was that was his plan. So to support that, he built this network of bunkers all over the country and filled them with all the Chinese munitions that he got. And but the war never came. And so when the Soviet Union collapsed and he had all these munitions were still there, and it got to the point actually that at a certain point the Albanian economy collapsed and the money was worthless, and so people started using ammunition as currency. So they would take a crate of ammo to the store and buy eggs or milk until they reinstituted the currency during the 90s. At the time, in 2007, Albania was trying to join NATO. And NATO required that one of the requirements for Albania to join was that they get rid of all their old munitions. So they were going to have to pay to dismantle all this stuff. And so they were thrilled to sell it for pretty much any price at all. And Henry had he was friends with the, at the time, the Albanian prime minister's son. So he had a really good connection with the government of Albania, and he was able to do this deal for us where we would pay I think we were paying 4 cents a round for the AK-47 ammo. So it was significantly less expensive than anywhere else that we had sources for.
Okay, so you make this deal with the Albanian government to buy millions of rounds of ammunition.
Yeah.
But when you go to actually check out the ammunition, you find out that it had Chinese markings all over it. Right. And China was on the blacklist to sell to the U.S. as well.
Right.
So how did you feel when you realized that this huge deal was about to fall apart?
Yeah, we were panicking because our contract specifically said no Chinese ammunition, directly or indirectly. Yeah. And it said that because there is an arms embargo against China that was put in place in 1989 after the Tiananmen Square massacre. And now this ammunition that was in Albania actually was given to the Albanians in the 70s, before China was put on the blacklist. So technically it didn't violate the terms of the embargo, but our contract with the army didn't mention the embargo at all. It just said no Chinese munitions directly or indirectly. So it did violate the terms of our commercial contract with the army. So we knew that unless we got permission for them to change the contract, this ammunition violated the terms of the contract. And so we were thinking about telling them and saying, hey, can you give us a waiver? And they probably would have done it in retrospect, because it turns out that they knew about the Chinese origin the whole time. We found that out later in court. But at the time, we didn't know that they knew. And so we didn't want to risk us losing a $300 million contract. So we decided to hire an Albanian guy to repackage it and get rid of all the Chinese markings.
Right.
Yeah.
So now you're basically trying to hide the fact that this is from China.
Yes.